time to abandon ship.
Oh no!
Here we go!
Can I persuade you to join us for a drink? It's a tradition. Here.
Jar Jar, homie, my main man, quickly. Before the Separatists attack, get into the escape pod.
Hey! This is escape, then we're the pod.
All right, welcome back to Star Wars Escape Pod, and this week we are getting into Ahsoka, possibly Dooku. We're going to be talking about Tales of the Jedi and this new, I want to call them micro season. I guess all these episodes are quite short, so we're going to be talking about each character's story arc individually, kicking things off with fan favorite Ahsoka Tano. We got our co-host Blake returning this week, and our good friend Kirk on the podcast. Let's do this.
Another happy landing.
All right. Well, this week, I gotta say, this Tales of the Jedi soundtrack by Kevin Kiner, I want to mention that as like, with a whole new Star Wars show, we get a whole new soundtrack, and it's always great. So Kevin Kiner returns for this show just as he did with The Bad Batch and Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels. He's nailed all the animated shows so far, I think, except Resistance.
Was that him in Resistance?
Yeah, I can't remember who did Resistance. I don't think it was him, though.
Okay, I wouldn't be surprised because I know that show they're specifically trying to be very budget friendly. So
Yeah.
they might have found someone who's maybe doesn't have as much experience.
A little bit cheaper on the wallet.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, let's let the audience. I feel like our listeners kind of know who you guys are, so I feel like we don't need to really do the introduction thing at first. At least at this point, we've talked about Andor so much in the past, and great to have you guys back on the show. We do have a quick message from Darth Maul, though, before we get started here.
You can call me Lord Maul. At last, we will reveal more news on the podcast.
Oh, there we go. All right. so thank you, Maul, for coming on the show. Yeah, Ahsoka Tano. I mean, this is a fan favorite character, and we've seen so much of this character. I almost hate to say that I was more excited for the Dooku stuff, just because he's such a fascinating character to me. And after all of Clone Wars, anytime Dooku's on screen, it's always such a mesmerizing kind of like soaking it all in. I mean, Christopher Lee's awesome, right?
Oh yeah, no, I agree entirely. And finally seeing Qui-Gon and Dooku together as Master and Apprentice, I think was something, at least I know, I was very excited to see. Was looking forward to for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it was like both storylines were awesome, but the Dooku storyline was just far more fascinating. Even before I started watching, I was really curious to see, because we hadn't really seen too much of him pre-Clone Wars and all that time.
Yeah, exactly. Anyone out there who wants more Dooku, definitely pick up the audiobook Dooku Jedi Lost. The animated series for the Tales of the Jedi flowed into that story really well with the narrative. And even though Corey Burton, the voice actor behind Dooku, he reprises his role from the Clone Wars in that respect. But all respects to Christopher Lee as well, who kind of brought that character to life initially back in Attack of the Clones, and of course the performance of Corey Burton is just fantastic. I feel like it really brings Christopher Lee back to life on the screen in some magical way. You know what I mean? So it's always great to see that character. But
yeah, absolutely. Did you also feel like with obviously the younger Dooku look and the voice, I don't know if the voice is a little bit different, but he kind of just reminded me of Snape. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Every time he spoke, that's what I was thinking about.
Yeah. What's funny about that is if you look up some some footage of Christopher Lee in his younger years playing in like the old Dracula movies or something. He doesn't sound quite the same as he would in more recent movies. And I don't know if that's just due to the way the microphones were done back then, or if it's just the way that he aged or whatever. But
Yeah, just could be time. I think
yeah,
people's voices are always changing, right? So
right.
by the time you're retirement age, I think you'll sound very different than when you're like in your 30s and 40s.
Yeah, exactly. And as he aged, I found he took more time with his words and took more kind of breaths between sentences. And
it's more regal, right?
yeah,
It sounds like he's more regal. That's what I found.
he posted a Christmas video message, which was, I think it was quite long. It was like 20 minutes or something like that. But I listened to it. It was a couple of years ago. And I just remember thinking to myself, wow, he's getting up there. I think it was like maybe a couple months or a year before he passed away, but yeah, he was slowing down. You know, you could tell he was slowing down quite a lot. But of course, that also has changes in your voice and everything like that. But yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about Dooku. But let's kick things off with Ahsoka Tano here.
Yeah, it's funny. We tease Dooku, and then we're going to talk about it for the next 45 minutes.
Yeah, I know, right?
We were really looking forward to Dooku, so we're going to talk about Ahsoka.
Psych, everyone. Okay. So
Tune
this
in
first
next week for Dooku.
We'll get there. Ahsoka Tano, the first episode in this Tales of the Jedi series is called Life and Death. And I thought that was really just like right out of the gate. I was like, what a great title for the episode, because it's such a parallel to the Clone Wars finale, which the Clone Wars finale episode was called Victory and Death. And I was like, wow, that's great. You kick things off with Ahsoka's life being like life and death. And then it just seems like, I don't know, it just seems like a little bit of a nod, a little bit of a nod to like, this is the beginning of one story. That's the end of another. Right. Yeah. Of course, not the end of Ahsoka's story. We're looking forward to the live action Ahsoka show next year. But yeah, we got a glimpse at Planet Shili, which there's been a bit of a confirmed, unconfirmed process about whether or not that is the homeworld of the Togrutas. It is. I had the audio description on, and the narrating person for the audio description actually described the village as a village on the planet Shili. So yeah, we got our first glimpse at where the species comes from, which is pretty neat. Something that we've never seen before. This is the
first time we've ever seen this, because I know there's a huge arc in regards in Clone Wars which had to do with Togrutas all being enslaved and sold.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember that. It was in relation to the Zygerians, and yeah, and I totally forget if it was just a village of people on a different planet, or if they were investigating the Zygerians on the case of just general slavery, and then they managed to liberate a bunch of Togrutas while they were, pulling that story to a close. So. Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I'm going to have to go back, and I was just seeing a bunch of stuff kind of floating around saying like, oh yeah, this is our first glimpse at what might be the Togruta homeworld. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
Fair enough.
The village celebrates the birth of a new member to their clan, which is Ahsoka Tano, daughter of Pav T, voiced by Janina Kavankar. Did either of you guys play through the Battlefront 2 campaign at all? Iden Versio?
Yep, I did.
Sure did.
Great story.
I recall her actually announcing that she was going to play Ahsoka's mother at the last Star Wars celebration here. She was pretty heartfelt about it.
Yeah, very heartfelt about it. Yeah, very, very much a fan herself of Star Wars, and it's always great to see people like that get roles within the saga. Just to kind of keep that true fan spirit alive in the performances, and it means a lot. So, yeah, that was really cool to see. We hear some Togruti spoken in this episode, which is, I guess, the name of their native language. And at least as far as my memory goes, we haven't really heard any Togruti spoken before. So that was pretty neat.
It's a good question. Yeah, I don't think we have either.
Yeah.
And I like that they really dove into the inspiration of their culture in this one.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what you're gonna get into, but we had glimpses. I think mainly in Clone Wars of seeing that they had a very almost like North American First Nations based history, or like their cultures that way. So I think that was pretty cool to actually see them dive into that, and we see kind of how the village lives and works, and then seeing that there's some spirituality in there, and it kind of leads right up to when they reveal that Ahsoka's a Jedi, which it's kind of all super tied together. I thought it was really well done.
Yeah, I found their value of life was very resemblant of how the Na'vi kind of value life in Avatar. You know, if anyone is, you know, big Avatar fans out there, I mean, there's a huge kind of resemblance I found with the Togrutas and the Na'vi. So especially the way when they're hunting, you know, and they take down the creature, and, you know, they whisper kind of a little prayer, you know, just like a bit of a thank you for your life that'll keep our village, you know, alive and well fed kind of thing, right? And, you know, the fact that they don't take more than they need and all that stuff, it was like very, very Avatar-ish to me. So
Yeah, it's very very similar.
yeah. Her mother, Pavti, tells her that she must face death and says that you must not fear it, which is definitely also another a bit of a nod to the Clone Wars finale as well, and you know, and the title again. I mean, really just being faced with death in the Victory and Death episode in Clone Wars. I mean, literally last shot of her just staring at the graveyard of clone troopers, you know, and, you know, prior to that on the ship, I mean, she faced risk of her own life being lost, you know, when Order 66 happened. So I thought that was really great. The fact that even a young Ahsoka was kind of demonstrated in this episode with just this fearlessness to her, right? It was just so cool.
Yeah, like when that line was attacking, I assume it was Ahsoka's mother or caretaker.
Mm-hmm.
She was kind of just like smiling there and having a bit of a look. She didn't look too too phased by it at all. So
Yeah.
I guess that was another indication that she had everything under control early on.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It was a bit of a shock when the tiger creature like takes her away, because then you're like, oh, okay, well, you know, we all know that she's gonna be fine, but like, I wonder what they're leading to with this, right?
I was impressed with the dexterity of the cat, because with those massive fangs, and was able to just kind of like nip her jacket and carry her away. Didn't eat her in one gulp. Didn't just grabbed her and carried her off.
Just conveniently grabbed her and meticulously put her down to have a chat back at his crib later.
Yeah. Exactly. Because at first I thought that he was carrying the infant back to feed it to like a cub, but there was no cub.
No.
He just wanted to enjoy his meal in peace somewhere else, I guess. I don't know.
See, that's something a dog would do.
Yeah, I could see that. Well, I don't know. They might also scarf it down. Remember, your dog would take no time to eat as fast as it could, so it wouldn't lose it.
Yeah, that's true. Afraid it would take the snack away.
Yeah, exactly. So just swallow it whole.
Yeah.
They ate that whole chicken wing. I remember that.
Just wolfing it down.
Just swallowed it, man.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's not good.
Let that bone digest.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. I got to say that the ending of this episode surprised me. I mean, I feel like just a general kind of, I know these are supposed to be short. I was a little bummed that they weren't longer.
They're really short.
Only because I love the Clone Wars animation style. I just love that storytelling. I love Dave Filoni. You know, I love Clone Wars. So I loved the idea of this Tales of the Jedi series. I only wish it was longer. I just wish that we got more of it. And I think that's just like probably the best way I can possibly criticize this show is I wish that we had more of it, you know?
I know. And I feel like the first thing that I did after I watched this episode in particular, and it sounds a bit weird, but I went back because I was amazed by just how great it looked. But then I went back and looked at the first, like the Clone Wars movie. Like, I didn't watch too much of it because I don't
think you'll be able to.
Yeah, I didn't watch too much of it. but just visually, like I don't even remember if I had the sound on, but I just wanted to look and reference it, and just to see how far the show has come, even compared just to season 6, for example. It's really come a long way, and I think even though like the episode was a bit short, I wish there was a little bit more to it in terms of the story. I really feel like this is like great proof that Star Wars can move forward in doing even feature films in this kind of medium. It's just as just has the same impact as what it does in live action, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the animated shows play such a huge part in the canonicity now. They're almost nearly as staple, I'd say, as the films. In fact, if it weren't for some of the more recent films undoing a little bit of story that I feel like we could have benefited from more ties to the animated stuff, the live action shows have really proven to kind of double down on going that opposite direction of actually integrating the animated stuff a lot better. Mm-hmm. And the Ahsoka series is definitely going to be like a Rebel season 5. We kind of like have the hints about that with what they revealed at some of the recent conventions. And the fact that Dave Filoni's kind of the guy in charge of those things, there's definitely a more sense of continuity between the two, right? So a lot more connective tissue there, and I feel like these animated shows, like, I can't get enough of them. The only thing I got to say about the finale of this episode is we didn't get the Plo Koon arrival on the planet and her induction into the Jedi. That was something that I thought for sure we would see, and a little bit bummed that we didn't get it, because I feel like the episode just ran a little bit too short. It ended off with them just saying Ahsoka is Jedi, right? And then boom, like cut to black. And I was like, okay, well, I guess someone calls the Jedi Order, is like, hey, we got one of your own here. Come and get her, kind of thing, right? Like I'd like to know how that conversation went down. No one wants to say goodbye to their kid, right? So I just
who just shows up and robs the cradle in the night.
Yeah, so I have questions, right? And if Tales of Jedi continues, I feel like it would be cool to get that story, but maybe from a Plo Koon side of things, maybe that's a Tales of the Jedi Plo Koon arc, seeing as we can't really go back and just make that one longer. Let's get, fingers crossed we get a Plo Koon arc.
Maybe there'll be a Dave Filoni director's cut.
Yeah. Maybe Dave Filoni director's cut. Yeah.
Instead of 17 minutes, it'll be 20.
Yeah.
Extended edition. Was it just me? Was it a little bit weird when like Ahsoka came back to the family, and then the elder kind of reached down and said like Ahsoka is Jedi? I always felt like there's a difference between someone being a Jedi and just like a general Force user, or being Force sensitive. Mm-hmm. But I don't know, maybe it's just a native user not a native person. They just kind of lump them all into one category.
Yeah, that's a great thing to point out, because you're totally right. Like I mean, unless the Torgrutas already have like this very over familiarity with what the Jedi do and like what they're like, then maybe they're a bit more kind of I don't know. Maybe they're a bit more connected to like what they're doing in the galaxy, rather than some people which might not even know what a Jedi really does. Like,
yeah, it's weird because we're now stuck in the middle of like two different ideas. Because originally it was everyone. This is what it was in the prequels. Everyone saw Force user or a lightsaber and immediately said, "Oh, it's a Jedi."
Yeah.
So even if it was a Sith, they would assume it was a Jedi, because that was just what people knew across the galaxy. Mm-hmm. But now we're learning in the sequels, there's all these other different Force-wielding groups, but no one ever seems to ever think of them. So it's like, which is it?
Yeah.
I feel like shouting, "Oh, look, it's a Force-sensitive person," is not as cool as like shouting, "Oh, Jedi."
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, I feel like that's just a thing, right? Like someone can be Force sensitive and they don't need to be a Jedi, but of course, like being outside viewers of this greater story, like we have kind of a different perspective on kind of how things are perceived. But I mean, maybe just the way that she says Ahsoka is Jedi, maybe that's what leads to them maybe calling them up and just saying like, "Hey, we got someone for you," kind of thing. Like, it would be our honor to kind of send our newest member of the clan into your order to keep the galaxy safe or something. Like, I have no idea.
Is it majority of the time that the case? I felt like more often the Jedi, caught word that there was Force sensitive, or they would sense it, and they just kind of showed up at your door and like, "We're taking your kid."
Yeah, that's what I kind of thought too. And the way that Ahsoka puts it in the Clone Wars, I forget who she's speaking to, but she says Plo Koon was the one who found me or discovered me, Master Plo, right? So it's in the first season. Like it's in the season in which Plo is he's trapped in that escape pod with those clone troopers right after the Malevolence kind of blows up, and it's like a rescue mission to try and find him, right?
Right,
So
yeah, there's all the space combat with the clones and all.
yeah, and Ahsoka's like
spacesuits.
really like emotionally attached to trying to find Master Plo, right? So I just thought to myself like, oh, okay, so maybe she was force sensitive, maybe maybe he was just at the right place at the right time, and like he found her and brought her back to the temple, right? So that's what I always thought. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe this new story kind of adds a little more to that, and we just don't know the full story still, even though this is kind of supposed to add more.
Season 2 is coming.
Season 2, yeah. Here we go.
Maybe she gets like kidnapped or move off world or whatever, and then
yeah,
she,
maybe
literally finds her, right?
Right.
She gets lost.
Right. Yeah. No, that's great. It's a great way to thinking outside the box with that one. Yeah.
Do we feel that we might get some Ahsoka flashbacks when it comes to the Ahsoka show next year? I feel like we won't, but maybe we could get some information on her.
If we get,
backstory.
yeah, so
with Anakin, that'd be so cool.
That would be really cool. So my speculation, at least, is we won't flash back farther than her time in Rebels.
Yeah, I think that's likely.
That's my suspicion.
Yeah,
because it'd be a whole different costume and like a whole.
It'd be a different
I think
age.
it's hard.
right?
Yeah, it'd be harder to do.
Yeah.
Like I feel like they got away with it with Obi-Wan and Anakin because all they had to do was put Hayden Christensen in a robe. They didn't even like de-age him. They just put him in, right?
Yeah.
So Ahsoka would be a lot more of a challenge. It'd have to be integral to the story, I would think, if that happens.
Yeah, and Rosario Dawson, like I think she plays an amazing wiser Ahsoka. And
We're an Ashley team here.
Yeah,
no, she's great.
Agree.
She's great. Yeah,
I do agree that I think Ashley plays an amazing Ahsoka for in her younger years and where she plays. But I don't see Rosario being able to play that younger Ahsoka. It just doesn't make sense, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I feel I just feel like no amount of de-aging and just
right.
Also, Ahsoka in the Clone Wars animated series, like she's a lot more of a smaller figure as well.
She's very skinny, yes.
Yeah, she's very, very small and stuff. So yeah, I don't really see them going back that far.
I think they'd have to cast a kid, like a child actor, to do that. Someone up to like 14.
Yeah, but then if you do that, like you can't not have Ashley's voice. So
right.
maybe they dub over it. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think be okay with that, doing like a lip sync with Ashley Eckstein.
That would be kind of cool, actually. You know, I don't know, maybe, or even I would say even get Ashley Eckstein in the costume. I mean, she's quite small and like still has the voice and everything, but yeah, they would have to do some de-aging and some makeup because I don't think she can quite. I don't know. She like
I guess yeah.
Like everyone, she gets older, right? Like everyone's aging,
right.
And so.
Yeah, I guess the voice they could do. They did it for Luke at least, and he sounded pretty flawless.
True.
In terms of in terms of them just dubbing over the mouth movements, but anyway, I'm also just looking forward to continuing Ahsoka's story during that series, and the flashbacks we can reserve it for another Tales of the Jedi season.
Absolutely. Episode 2, it's called Practice Makes Perfect. So we flash forward in Ahsoka's life to. And mind you, this is episode 5 out of 6. So we're kind of we kicked off the season with the first Ahsoka episode. Then we had the Dooku trilogy of episodes, and then we get the last 2 Ahsoka episodes. So I don't really know if they were trying to do that just in terms of like chronologically, but it still doesn't really quite make any sense because she's definitely not born before Obi-Wan becomes Qui-Gon's apprentice. Like, I just feel like there's a bit of a weird timing disconnect there. Because
I didn't get it either. It felt like they started and then they switched ideas and then tagged it on at the end. I don't know. I'd rather them just been groups of 3, honestly.
Yeah, I would have been fine with that, right? Like, because they're all kind of just spaced out in time anyway. So, like, it's just, like, it was a little confusing to just kind of go hopping around all over the place. But
I would say the Dooku stuff's more confusing because you can't tell his age difference except for the length of his beard.
well, the timing of events, though, they do a good job integrating the events in the episodes to kind of let you know when things are happening. But yeah, for the Ahsoka ones, I was just a little confused why the first one was at the first part of the season and then the last 2 were kind of much later. But whatever, I'm not like complaining. It was just a bit strange.
It was very Clone Wars on brand. I mean,
yeah.
you have to whip out those like guides to figure out like which episodes are in chronological order. Otherwise, if you watch it on Disney Plus, it's all over the place. So maybe they would just be like, you know what, we're just gonna bring back the old days.
I feel like Dave walks in the room after the whole season's complete. Like, all right, Dave, we're ready to push it out to Disney Plus. And you're like, no, you guys, we gotta roll the dice and decide which one comes before that one.
That was George Lucas's call. They're probably like, "Hey George, what order would you release it in?" You're like, "Oh, that one." And
Out of order.
Then
You gotta mix it up. Like a salad. You gotta stir it up. Make a
We'll
stew.
put the finale straight at episode 1. Finale at the start, then the first episode at the end.
Oh man!
Like, George, can we start with the last one first?
No, it's gotta be in the middle. Gotta be in the middle.
Be in the middle.
Right in the middle. Just get that one first. Then they'll have questions and you can answer them later, and it's great.
Oh George, what would we do without you?
Oh, well, I love George. All right. Anakin watches a young Ahsoka fight training remotes, and Obi-Wan has his mullet back. But why?
Yeah,
That
Why?
was
right?
glorious.
I mean, I love the mullet, but I mean, why? I mean, at the beginning of the Clone Wars, he doesn't have the mullet. He's got his his episode 3
That's
look,
right.
Then Ahsoka becomes Anakin's Padawan, right, on Christophsis. And now we're going backwards. We're giving him the longer hair, but this episode takes
the old
place after.
costume.
So there's a bit of
the old costume.
Yeah. They have the armor pieces, but like he's got the mullet, right? So
I think they did it just to do the mullet.
I think they literally just wanted the mullet just to kind of let people know visually this takes place closer to that episode 2 kind of time frame. And I know it's a bit of a retcon based on the model that we had in the early Clone Wars seasons, especially when Ahsoka becomes Anakin's apprentice on Christophsis. But at the same time, it's like, you know what? I can get by it. It's not a huge deal. Like, whatever, right?
It's so funny because the way that Clone Wars is animated, all the hair is joined together. So,
Yeah,
like,
it's just single mesh.
Obi-Wan's mullet is like an entity in itself. It just like moves all together.
It's like a
and,
squid.
Jiggles around.
It's, like, the first, like when he came onto frame, and they're like, I think it was in the induction session or Ahsoka's trial. That's like the first thing I noticed. I'm like,
Oh yeah,
there's the mullet.
Yeah.
same thing.
Yeah,
It's very in your face. I love it.
I feel like for some people though who wouldn't have seen Clone Wars, or maybe it's been a while, like it doesn't really need to make a whole lot of like connection to, like, it's not, I don't know, it's not like I'm throwing this episode in the Clone Wars timeline mix of like chronologically to order, throw that episode in for that show, then you go back to Clone Wars show and keep watching, like, then it gets really confusing. So I feel like they were just like, you know what, we just need a visual cue to let people know this is this moment of this episode takes place. And then when we flash forward later and, we get the new models without the Clone Wars armor, then it's later, right?
Like you were saying, it doesn't make sense with the fact that the movie comes before it and his hair is shorter.
Exactly. Yeah.
Here's my theory. I think Dave Filoni always wanted the mullet, but George wouldn't let him have it, and this was his chance.
Maybe.
Yeah. He's like, we're doing it. George isn't here. We're
Clone
doing the
Wars.
mullet.
Clone Wars Season 8, Return of the Mullet.
Now we're talking Revenge of the Mullet.
It's really interesting because here in Australia, at least, every single person, I reckon like 80%, from 17 to like 21, every guy has a mullet. It's I don't know how much contribution.
Rite of passage.
Yeah, I don't know how much contribution Obi-Wan has to this, but the last 2-3 years, it's become so popular. It's like the 80s down here. That's what
great.
it reminds me.
Well,
of.
maybe it's because of Star Wars. It was shot in Australia, right? Maybe it set a trend. It was like, I want to be like that guy, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Let's do it.
That's true.
Yeah, rocking your
be it.
mullets ever since 2002. So this is Ahsoka has a unique costume in this training episode at the beginning. It's not the tube top that we've seen in Clone Wars before. It's more of a complete vest. It's got some white underneath it. It was interesting that they chose not to use the tube top Ahsoka that we saw for like 2.5 seasons of Clone Wars. I mean, we just talked about the mullet thing, but which was maybe just a choice of like visual cue for timeline. But the costume for Ahsoka, like that was a bit of a different story. I thought that was a little curious of a choice as to why they would kind of go in a completely different direction with that. And to me, that just didn't really make a whole lot of sense. So I was just wondering what you guys thought on that.
I didn't notice, honestly. I wasn't paying like lots of attention to her costume.
Yeah, any thoughts, Kirk? Oh,
You're muted.
can't hear Kirk.
Okay, I'm back here.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
noticed. I noticed like a small difference, but yeah, it wasn't too noticeable. It's
The colors are the same.
I feel like the colors are the same. I feel like it could have just been like a training outfit or something. And I guess one thing I find in Clone Wars is that throughout the entire show and in Star Wars as well, the characters quite often just stay in the exact same outfit. So I guess it's fair
They
to
don't
assume.
do laundry, or they only
Yeah,
have
right.
like they open their closet and it's just all the same. It's like
Yeah, exactly.
Lando's cloaks.
Fair enough.
So,
Terry, go
yeah,
ahead. Go
so,
ahead.
so like long story short, I feel like it could have just been like a different outfit, but
Yeah. Terrace Nube, we've seen his corpse in the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, and he was most known from the Clone Wars episode Lightsaber Lost, which is when Ahsoka loses her lightsaber. This really slow turtle Jedi kind of helps her track it down. And he's actually got the first white lightsaber that we saw in an animated show. He pulls it out of a cane and he lights it up. So to me, I was also a little confused when I noticed that the blade was blue, and I thought to myself, that's not his lightsaber color. Like that's a little strange. I know it was from behind a blue kind of laser wall, so maybe something weird in the rendering side happened with his lightsaber being white and it just turned blue. But I thought that was at least worth mentioning, just because he's kind of one of those very few people so far that we know he's got a white lightsaber. And
I didn't even know that.
Yeah. It must have been a while though since you've seen that episode. So
Yeah, but I've seen it like 4 or 5 times. I've never noticed.
he whips it out very briefly. Like he doesn't use it until like the very, very end when he arrests that lightsaber thief, and then that's it, right? So we don't really see a whole lot of it. We got a young Caleb Doom in this episode, which is pretty sweet. Kanan Jarrus from Star Wars Rebels. You see him in the background. He's the young apprentice that kind of goes, yeah, like when Ahsoka's training. So that was pretty cool.
Did we?
Yeah,
I completely missed
so
that.
he is the kid that's on the sidelines on the bleachers, and he's watching Ahsoka train. That's Kanan Jarrus. And there's like some people saying he shouldn't be there. He's slightly too early in the timeline to kind of have him as an apprentice. He technically should be maybe like a youngling at this point, and then towards the end of the Clone Wars, that's when he's like a new apprentice. And that's when the Order 66 happens. So he's not really supposed to be trained as an apprentice throughout the 3 years of the Clone Wars, at least as far as my understanding goes. But I guess maybe they decided to throw it in there just kind of because, it'd be cool to have kind of a nice cameo in there. So, I don't know. Again, we don't know when this episode takes place in the early of the Clone Wars. In fact, we don't even know when in that 3-year timeline how all the episodes in that multi-season show fit in. Like it might be possible that 4 through the end or 3 through the end takes place within the last like 6 months, right? And the first 2 seasons, the first couple of years, I have no idea. Because
is it during the time jump?
That's the thing, right? Because like after season 3, at some point the models changed, and all of a sudden everyone looked older and different. So it's really tough to determine how or when all of these episodes actually happen in the 3 years of the Clone Wars. And we don't know when this. We know it takes place closer to episode 2, but we don't know how close it actually is, because it could be after season 1 at some point. So yeah.
Do we wish that they put in the dates like they did in Andor for the first time?
That'd be
or
cool. Yeah. I mean,
or do we prefer that like this just is like general, or we can assume and leave it up to assumption that it's given in a specific time period?
You like suggesting that for like future animated shows kind of thing, like whether or not I would like that. Like,
I feel like it gets too complicated because like you had to do every episode and try to explain like this was 235 days after the Battle of Yavin.
Yeah.
65 days before we found out the Empire was starting Death Star 2.
You know, when they reveal the title card, I wouldn't be opposed to some sort of small date as a text line underneath somewhere. Like maybe like give us some sort of like something BBY. That's fine. Like that wouldn't bother me at all. I thought it was kind of neat when they put that in Andor, but yeah, I mean, who knows?
I'm also gonna say I feel like they don't want to do that because they have room to slide things around if they wanted to.
That's the thing, right? And that's kind of what I'm getting at is like they've got the freedom right now when they're really ambiguous with things, like they have this creative liberty to like then change things later, and then it makes it less kind of hard edge where retconning this, right? So it's more of like a soft line, and I think that's kind of the idea, is that there's room to breathe, there's room for more stories. So
yes, it's kind of keeps slotting more stuff in.
Yeah, they don't want to box themselves in. Yeah. We've seen Anakin just dominate the training remotes in the Anakin and Obi-Wan comic. He clearly doesn't think it's a challenge for Ahsoka and thinks that she could take on something more difficult. So he gets Rex and the 501st clones to train her with stun blast in a circular formation around her at the clone barracks. And he says droids are predictable. He wants her to be ready for just about anything. And I thought this is not something Obi-Wan would do. He would just go with the flow. He's a council member. He follows the rules, you know.
That's what he did, right? That's the training that Anakin did too. He even says that.
Yeah, and Anakin was just too good for it, right? Like we've seen him kind of just in the comic, he was just like freaking dominating, right? And like showing off, doing backflips, and he got scolded for it. I mean, like it was kind of a funny moment in the comic book, but I thought it was interesting that they rolled that into this show. And you know, it brought me back to a Clone Wars quote, which I thought was really like the most critical flashback for me in my head in relation to what this episode was trying to do, which was trying to demonstrate why Ahsoka survives in the first place, like why she actually lives Order 66, right? And
did you ever question that though when you watched the final episode of Clone Wars, where you think, oh no wait, Ahsoka could never be able to do that?
No, and here's why. In the Clone Wars movie, the glorious movie that Kirk you were just talking about earlier, there's a oh sorry, you muted again, man.
Is it the movie that Martin Scorsese labels as cinema? Is it that one?
He probably is.
That's my guess.
I there's a quote that Anakin says after she saves his life in Christophsis. She like pulls a wall down on top of a bunch of droids, and he like, you know, he's like super mad about it because like he's like, oh, I could have been killed. And he says when they're sitting on a bench together, he says, you're reckless, little one. You never would have made it as Obi-Wan's Padawan, but you might make it as mine. And then she kind of looks over at him, and he's like, all right, come on, let's go. And then I was like, oh, that's such a great quote, because it really demonstrates that he's not the norm. You know, he's not your average Jedi master. He doesn't even want a Padawan, but it's his responsibility to keep her alive. And he kind of mentions that in this episode. And I thought it was so unorthodox for a Jedi to actually have clone troopers train a Padawan.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is such a core reason for why she lives in the first place, because she knows how those clones fight. You know, she knows she's been trained to fight them, literally. And I thought it was such a great demonstration, furthermore, on top of what we already know from her from Clone Wars, why she's able to make it.
You know, it makes sense. And I also like the kind of the the line drop where Ahsoka's like, "Why do I need to do this? Clones are so much better than droids."
Yeah.
just to show, just like droids are really garbage.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And it makes me really think that like post Vader passing away and like the end of Return of the Jedi, and even with Luke, I feel like Ahsoka is still the best lightsaber swordsman in the galaxy, even with Luke around. I don't know if that's like a hot topic, but I feel like she's had so much more like combat experience with lightsabers over the years. She's been trained by Anakin, and she's obviously a lot older than Luke as well. But yeah, it kind of made me step back for a little bit, because I was like, wow, this whole time I've been thinking, Luke's the most powerful Jedi during that time period, but I really feel like Ahsoka probably has the upper hand in terms of that. And this episode really kind of showed a bit more of where it kind of comes from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
It's a good question though, because who did Luke train from, right? Instead of just self-taught. Maybe Ahsoka trains him. Maybe that's something that happens.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe we'll get glimpses of that in the next Mandalorian season or something. Yeah.
I didn't think about that before.
Or in the Ahsoka show, maybe.
Yeah, potentially too.
Yeah.
When is the Ahsoka show set in? Do we know what time period it's
post Rebels?
So it's post Rebels, which Rebels flashed forward to right after Return of the Jedi at some point, but it's pretty vague as to when after Return of the Jedi. So maybe it's going to flash back to after Return of the Jedi, fill in some gaps similar to like how Boba Fett did it, and then bring us up to speed with where we are in her appearance in The Mandalorian, and then just kind of carry the show forward from there.
Do we want it to be that far ahead, or are we better off starting earlier and just going from there?
If we're getting a second season for Ahsoka, I'd be fine the whole show taking place before Mando. But if there's no second season, then I'd be fine with the flashbacks, just to kind of fill us in,
there's a lot we don't know. That the flashback was to show that they're going to search for Ezra. Right?
Yeah. So that's the flash forward. Yeah, the flash forward moment.
Sorry, flash forward. Yes. And we also know that at that point, it seems like they're leading up to Thrawn is also alive, and we've been speculating that Thrawn's can be the big bad for all the different Disney Plus series coming together.
Mm-hmm.
So universe, it's all coming together.
Yeah,
exactly. It's going to be the Disney Plus version of Endgame for Star Wars. That's what it seems like.
Yeah. Yeah, really. It's like how they were doing the Marvel Netflix shows, like Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and then they pulled off the Defenders, which kind of like brought it all together, sort of thing. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess we'll have to wait and see. But I'm expecting to hear.
I think it seems likely, especially because everyone loves Thrawn. And I can't see them only ever using him in Rebels. And it was such a good response to him in Rebels. And he's the best villain to have.
I just had to play that. Yeah, no, I totally agree. He's such a great villain. We're all really looking forward to Thrawn. That's going to be so cool.
Let's not forget Mara Jade.
Mara Jade. Let's bring back Mara Jade.
Can we get a confirmed actor for Thrawn in the end?
So, I think it's just I don't know if it's a rumor or if it's confirmed, but it's Mads Mikkelsen's brother who voices him in the show. But I don't know if he's actually reprising his role in live action or if it's going to be somebody else. But I guess we'll see.
His name's Sads Mikkelsen, right?
Yeah, Lars. Yeah, I don't know actually. It's been a while since I was looking at all this Thrawn stuff, but I guess we'll find out.
Coming up quick now, right?
Yeah, it's gonna be crazy. This episode ends off with a bit of a crossover from the season finale episode of Star Wars: The Clone Wars, which is Victory and Death. And when the clones are awaiting Rex and Ahsoka in the big hangar on the Venator class ship. And Rex says, "Let's hope all that training pays off." It's not Clone Wars footage, but the dialogue that he has when they walk through the door, he says, "Hold your fire," and that is the same line. So it's
I wonder this.
Yeah.
Because I thought it'd be super cool if he had already said that in the
That would have been really cool. Yeah. Yeah, that would have been
finale.
really cool. I thought it was neat at least that they extended that scene just very briefly, just to kind of like give us a little bit of like, oh, this is what happened right before they walk through the door, like right before they kind of like play along with the trap. I thought that was really neat how he kind of has a piece of dialogue there that really plays homage to that entire episode of the Tales from the Jedi. So that was really, really neat. Final episode is Resolve. And I'm just going to start off by saying this. There's some things I love about this. There's some things that I really didn't like about it. And we'll get to those things. And I'm kind of curious, like, I'm kind of curious about you guys' thoughts as well. It's more towards the end, but we kick things off. Really cool stuff. We kick things off with Padme's funeral. Timeline-wise, this works 100% because the flash forward events of Revenge of the Sith that happened make this possible. She did have time to get to Naboo in the following days after she and Rex got away from that dust ball planet after the purge happened. Just the order of events with the construction of the Death Star, the delivery of the twins to Tatooine, like the whole end of Revenge of the Sith, the timeline wise is very like vague and ambiguous. And like, we don't really know exactly, like it doesn't all happen like the regular cut of the movie.
Which is funny because when you watch it, it feels like that's what it is. It's just like everything's kind of back to back, you know, like within a few days, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So the very end of the movie is so different from the rest of the pacing of the films. Really bringing that 6-movie saga to a close, right? Like it was kind of the final stamp on the envelope. And Padme's funeral, such a sad, kind of dreary moment. I thought it was such a beautiful thing that she was there, that she made an effort to like be there. And Bail Organa kind of confronts her about it and asks like, why did you like, you're risking everything being here. Like, why are you here? And she says like, she was my friend. And you know, so a Jedi is not really one to have many friends, but we know that Rex, Anakin, and Padme mean a lot to her, right? And probably the 3 biggest people in her life that really do mean a lot, you know.
And on top of that, she was trained by Anakin, and this is something Anakin always struggled with. So she's gonna have some attachment issues too.
Yeah, and being Anakin's apprentice, she would have spent a lot of time around Padme. There's quite a few arcs in which her and Padme go off on their own, you know, do their own thing, or you know, she's Anakin's apprentice, right? Like, you know, naturally she would just kind of be exposed to hollow calls and whatever, random visits or whatever. Who knows, right? So I thought it was kind of a really nice thing that she showed up at the funeral. And Bail gives her a comm device to let her know that, you know, she can do right by the people of the galaxy, hold her duty and obligation when she's able, kind of thing. And I thought it was really neat that he was able to have that conversation with her while talking to the clone troopers. And it's just like the clone troopers,
and the clones be so confused.
Yeah. If you ever need anything, be sure to call. The clones are probably like, what?
I love through like the details of the animation. They like, because you obviously can't tell what facial expressions the clones are doing, but like just the way their head moved and everything, it was just like, this is really confusing.
Yeah, the small cock of their head kind of thing. Like,
it's like this old guy's gone on a walk into a restricted area and he's losing his marbles. He's got no idea what is going on.
Yeah, exactly. I thought it was so neat. So this is, we flash to a planet which in the audio description or on screen we don't get the name to, but we actually know the name because this second half of the episode takes place around an event that happens in the Ahsoka novel written by E.K. Johnston. And this book has been under fire a lot with the more recent additions to canon in the animated shows. And I'm going to start off by saying Clone Wars finale, the duel between her and Maul, overwrote every single piece of dialogue and flashback stuff that book gave us as an Easter egg at the beginning. And throughout the book, there was like these flashback interludes that gave us glimpses at the Battle of Mandalore at the end of the Clone Wars. This was when Clone Wars was canceled and there was no plan to finish it, right? So that book came out, filled in the gaps. We all kind of knew what happened between her and Maul so that we would kind of understand the Rebels moments better, right? And then Clone Wars got renewed, Clone Wars got finished, and the dialogue and the events and whatever got kind of changed so that the characters weren't saying the exact same things as were quoted in the book and all that stuff. And I thought, okay, well, it kind of sucks, but at the same time, like, it kind of makes sense, I guess. Besides, it was
let's admit it. You preferred to see the animated.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I would have preferred. Yeah, I prefer the I can just rip out those pages and be done with it. But yeah, I mean, like, I totally, yeah, exactly. This, however, I had a bit of a bigger problem with, because it not only negates the novel, it negates the Darth Vader comic books, which had established visual look for all of the Inquisitors, at least a majority of them. And in addition to that, it also went out of its way further with the majority of the events. It still stuck to the basic points, similar to the Kanan redo of the origin redo in Bad Batch. It totally went in a different direction from the original comic, but it kind of kept the basic steps, right? So they didn't mention that this was Rada, but it is. Rada is like a farming planet that Ahsoka kind of seeks refuge on to get away from, the Empire, and she goes by the code name Ashla. They kept all that very consistent. Ashla is the original name for the Force, once upon a time, before George kind of rewrote the script multiple times. And she saves a farmer from hail bays toppling over onto her, and it seems that her brother has ratted her out to the Empire. An Inquisitor shows up, they fight, she beats him really fast. Bale picks up her and the farmers. They have a small, discussion about her kind of coming back and helping the rebellion or whatever, right? And the village is destroyed. So I
was trying to remember how this progressed in the novel, because I haven't read it since it came out.
Yeah, so the novel went like this. Basically, she ends up on Rada, right? She befriends a farmer. Her name is Caden Lart. And she is a bit of a rebel. Her and some of the villagers take up arms on Rada in an assault on a local Imperial base, which has established itself on the planet, and that results in some danger in which Ahsoka uses her powers to save Caden and some of the people, and it essentially reveals herself to the Empire in that event. Which is why the Inquisitor shows up, which happens to be the sixth brother. And if anyone knows what the sixth brother looks like from the Vader comics, he's very different looking than the Inquisitor that we got in this show. He's like a green-skinned guy with a helmet that has like these fang things coming down over his face, and very different character, visually looking, right? And so that's why he shows up, because word gets out within the Empire, and a Jedi just saved a bunch of rebels as we were about to, kick their butt when they came to attack our base, kind of thing. And that's kind of why the Inquisitor shows up, wrecks the village, nearly kills a bunch of people, but Ahsoka steps into place. The way that he dies was also different. She reaches out through the Force, and it's kind of weird what happens. Like, her touch to his lightsaber hilt cracks it, and it basically blows up in his face, like leaving just like nothing left of his face. It was actually quite a vividly gross death, but it was cool. And the only thing different about that was in this version, she steals the Inquisitor's lightsaber and cuts off his head, which somehow disintegrates beneath the mask. And we assume
the mask like deflates.
Yeah, and
like he was just a balloon animal.
Yeah, something like that. Like, I was like, okay, I hope people don't like think that this is the same thing as like the Jedi's bodies disappearing into the Force, because that could be misinterpreted very differently.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah, and then finally, they didn't show something that I thought they would show, which is the Inquisitor's lightsaber that shows up to kill her. She uses those crystals in that hilt to make her white lightsabers, and they didn't show that, and I was very surprised as to why they didn't do that, because maybe again it might just be like a running short on time sort of scenario. But Blake, I know you read the Ahsoka novel. Kirk, did you read this at all back when it came out?
I haven't read it, so a lot of it's catching up for me, but no, I haven't had the chance to read it yet.
Okay,
I
so
think it's the only novel that has basically been entirely removed from canon, even though it was
Yeah.
advertised as like the first canon novel.
yeah,
basically.
because this episode, so like the Darth Maul flashbacks I can get by. We're talking about like 2 pages of like interlude stuff and then that's it. But this entire episode essentially overwrites massive plot lines and entire chapters in the Ahsoka novel. So I guess my question to the room and to just our audience, feel free to send in an email, voicemail. Like, I'd actually like to hear a lot of opinions on this, but like, is it a good idea to just accept kind of the creative liberties that they make with the animated shows in favor of overwriting what we know as canon from the books?
Then we're just back to George
If-
Lucas canon.
Exactly, yeah. If we consider the book canon as actual canon in terms of like patching up plot holes and storylines and stuff that we might be what we might have questions to that the films give us, like we were just mentioning, like Shadows of the Sith, that novel that finally kind of fills in some gaps from the sequels with Rey's origin and the Luke and Lando thing from Episode 9, like all that stuff. We rely on things like the books to kind of fill in the gaps, but what happens when we get a story like this, which, I love the whole thing and it was great, but like I just have kind of concerns, like where's the canon going to? Because I thought the whole initiative was really to kind of keep things consistent, right? And even Ewan McGregor said when he was talking about Obi-Wan on his press tour for the show, the details in anything like a video game can't be too different from that of the films or the shows, right? And I thought like even the actors know this, right? So
Yeah, they do. I feel like there is always going to be some type of canon hierarchy when it comes to storytelling, just because there's so much content out there. And I also feel that I don't know whether or not it may have been an oversight, because obviously Dave Filoni is pretty aware of a lot of the Star Wars content outside of what's been shown on the big screen or on TV. But I definitely feel like there is an element to that the story team look at and say, hey, how many people have consumed this and what's the negative impact for us overriding the story, and is this more of an interesting kind of compelling arc?
That
Which is
makes
really
sense.
interesting. Yeah, which is really interesting that you found that part of the show not as compelling or not as great, because from my perspective, I haven't read the Ahsoka novel, but I still had some not great reactions with this episode, but on a completely different perspective, being the fact that I felt the whole story arc of her going to that farming town and revealing her force powers a little bit, them being dubbed on. I feel like that story has been done quite often.
Yeah.
Like the whole of season 7, her arc with the sisters was pretty much that. So I really felt like that for a 17-minute episode. Again, visually great. I enjoyed seeing it, but like for me, it's like I've seen this before, and she also kind of revealed her force powers for a bunch of hay falling on a child. And I'm not a farmer, but if it was rocks and stuff, okay. But like it just seemed kind of weakly done in the story. I don't know if you guys agree with me or not, but
I
feel
totally agree. I think the funeral stuff was cool. I feel like when it cuts to her on Rada, we could have skipped the whole ordeal with her saving the farmer, all that stuff with her eating dinner with them, like all that stuff. Like I feel like that was just kind of wasted time. We could have skipped all that stuff, just cut right to the fight where they're just, she's just in mid-battle now with the Inquisitor, right? We know who the Inquisitors are, right? Like they've been around for a while. They've been in Kenobi, they've been in Rebels, they've been in comic books, they've been in novels, So I don't think there's any question as to like, oh, who's that guy with the lightsaber? I would have like kept the design the same as the Sixth Brother. I would have kept the dialogue as close as possible to the novel, and then I would have been happy, right? And still would have been time with cutting out all that farming stuff. There still would have been time to give context to the fight and have Bale show up and maybe even throw in the lightsaber purifying moment, because that would have been really cool on screen. We've never seen that on screen before.
That would be cool.
So
100%. Yeah. I really feel like with these short episodes, if they want to continue with the second season, they really need to look at what is in the actual show in terms of the writing and say, does this add value to the character, and does it add depth to the character and give us a better understanding of their motivations and everything. And I feel like everything else in the show, like even the first Ahsoka episode, shows that she was force sensitive from a very young age and had abilities that no one else had. And even the interaction with Anakin and her training added a lot of value there, even down to her interaction with Bail Organa at the start on Coruscant. But like her sitting around at a farm and doing another session of her saving this person and revealing her force powers, like I don't want to be too critical, but like it just seemed like it wasn't
bit stale.
If the show was like, okay, 20 episodes long, 20 minutes each, it's nice just to kind of sit back and watch that. But that's at least the part that I found that could have been a little bit different. And the Inquisitor at the end was, even obviously very different to the Ahsoka book, I felt was just like rushed in, like here's some action that we can use for content in the trailer. I don't know if I'm being overly negative with this one, but
no, I totally feel. I think it's fair, right? I think it's fair to hold them accountable for this whole canon continuity, because there's a lot of Star Wars fans out there that really had strong attachments to the EU, and a lot of that stuff was kind of, I don't want to say discarded, but let's say tossed in, like, you know, tossed on the back burner. And well, I mean, really just tossed in the sock drawer because for a rainy day, because I mean, it's not like they were ever going to tell more stories in the Legends continuity, right? And in favor of doing new stories that made their new movies make sense. But now they're putting
which ironically they did because they didn't want to hinder their writers, right?
Yeah, exactly. But now it's back in the same box again, where we're getting stories that are just butting heads. And it's like, okay, I mean, really someone needs to think far enough in advance to, which is almost impossible when Disney comes to Dave and like, hey, you got permission to do like a, 6-episode mini series. What do you want to do? But then it's just a matter of trying to juggle, like, okay, what have we done so far? How do we make that, make sense within what we're doing? Because it really puts into question every book and comic I've ever read. Like, was it a waste of time? We're talking about established canon here. So, I mean, like, not to be a canon freak or anything, because, like, I don't want to be, but it's just kind of weird, right? Like, I just find it's like, it's like, come on, guys. Like, whenever I see anything like that, I enjoyed it, but it was also like, I don't know. I had my head shaking, head nodding moments. So
yeah, which I guess like it leans into the like my question in general about Star Wars, and I'm really grateful that we get so much Star Wars content these days.
Yeah.
But are we happy for having the quantity of Star Wars where the occasional episode either breaks previous canon or isn't as strong in terms of story, or would we prefer to get less content every year and have it more kind of refined and I guess chiseled towards like advancing Star Wars as a franchise in general?
Well, I think we've seen how that's gone, at least from the Lucasfilm perspective.
Yeah.
And that's like the point I'm trying to make. I hope that they still remember the mistakes that were done, and they're not all bad, but like, I love Star Wars. I want to keep seeing more of it. I'm really glad that we got so much this week, but and it's nothing that end of the world, but looking forward to getting some good quality stuff.
Yeah, that's a great note to end on here. So Blake, you got any last minute things to bring up?
I guess I will say I definitely enjoyed the Dooku storylines more.
Yeah.
I think that the Ahsoka stuff, well, it's other stuff we've already tread on or felt, I guess, maybe a little fluffy. Like maybe they picked Ahsoka for the sake of it being Ahsoka. Whereas Dooku, I felt like there was actually a story we hadn't seen before.
Yeah.
Because I read the novel, so like I already knew more or less what was going to happen there, right? So that wasn't really new to me. And whereas Dooku is, to me, something that has kind of been untapped. So if they do more, I would hope that they again pick characters that are maybe more in line with Dooku, of stuff that we've just never seen but have kind of always wanted. Like, maybe we get like a Plagueis thing going on here with Emperor Palpatine.
That'd be pretty good. That would be awesome. No, I totally agree. And I'm looking forward to chatting about those Dooku episodes as well with you guys. So, the Ahsoka one, I hate to say it, but it may have been from a marketing standpoint. We got a live action show coming out next year. Let's integrate Ahsoka into people's lives in a real quick highlight reel. Bang, there you go, right?
It was good trailer material in the end.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe that's why. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but maybe they needed to explain what happened to her like after Revenge of the Sith, because it's gonna have something to do with what's happening in the live action show.
Yeah, maybe. For sure.
I really hope that we get a whole season of Bail Organa tricking clone troopers in the end. I want more of that.
Yeah, I just hope that more specifically he has to seem like he's just like getting old and his mind's going. Just kind of
Hey, I'm still
crazy.
I'm still waiting for more chapters of the Calrissian Chronicles. So
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
all right, fellas. We'll catch you in the next one.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
We'll see you out there. Keep flying.
All right, and to all the listeners out there, a quick message from Anakin Skywalker.
This is Anakin Skywalker calling, and you're tuning into the best podcast in the galaxy, Star Wars Escape Pod.
All right. Thank you for tuning in, and big thank you to Blake and Kirk for joining us this week. Looking forward to getting into that Dooku story very soon, and of course, episode 9 of Andor. Be sure to keep tuning into Star Wars Escape Pod, share the show with a friend, and drop a 5-star review. That'll help us out a lot. May the Force be with you.